She thought it was just another wedding invitation. But when Mia Victoria walked into the grand estate, she didn't realize it was the wedding of billionaire Smith William. One wrong step, one stolen glance, and her life changed forever. This is a story of fate, love, and the lesson that sometimes mistakes lead us to where we truly belong. Mia Victoria lived a quiet life, one that many would call ordinary, yet inside her heart was a storm of unspoken dreams. At 25, she was not like other girls who partied in city lights or traveled across countries. Her world was small, just the corner flower shop where she worked, surrounded by roses, daisies, and tulips. Every day, she smiled at customers, tied ribbons around bouquets, and inhaled the sweetness of flowers she could never afford for herself. Though her hands touched roses daily, Mia longed for a different kind of bloom in her life. A spark, a moment where her world would feel bigger than bills stacked on her kitchen counter, bigger than the landlord's knocking, bigger than her fear of always staying unseen. One chilly morning, as Mia rushed out of her tiny apartment holding her worn purse close, her eyes caught something unusual on the floor. A cream-colored envelope rested neatly against her door, like a secret waiting to be found. Her name was written across it, Mia Victoria, in handwriting that looked too perfect to belong to anyone she knew. Her breath caught. Who would send her such a beautiful letter? The paper looked expensive, the seal golden, glimmering faintly in the morning light. For a moment, Mia's heart beat faster, as if destiny had just knocked on her door. She tore the envelope open carefully, as though she was unwrapping treasure. Inside was an invitation, elegant, royal, the kind of invitation she had only ever seen in magazines. At the top, it said wedding celebration. Her lips curved into a small smile. Perhaps it was from an old classmate, or maybe a customer who had remembered her kindness. She thought back to her friend from college who had spoken about an upcoming wedding. Maybe she had simply forgotten. Mia pressed the invitation to her chest, excitement rushing through her veins. She hadn't been invited to anything fancy in years. She didn't even have a gown, only a simple dress she rarely wore. Yet for once, she felt included in something grand, something beyond her small apartment and flower shop life. Days passed, and every time she looked at the card, her heart fluttered. She could almost see herself in a room filled with lights, music, and laughter. If only for one evening, she could live a life that wasn't hers. The day finally came. Mia stood in front of a mirror, wearing her best gown, a soft cream color that hugged her gently. Her shoes were borrowed from a friend, slightly loose, but she didn't mind. She pinned her hair up in the neatest way she could manage, her hands trembling with a mix of nerves and excitement. "Don't look at me like I don't belong," she whispered to her reflection, gathering courage. With a final deep breath, she stepped into a cab, her heart racing. The driver asked for the address, and when Mia read it aloud, she almost laughed. It sounded like a palace, not a venue. The cab rolled down streets she had never seen before, lined with tall iron gates, glittering lanterns, and mansions that seemed carved from marble. She held the invitation tighter, her pulse quickening. When the car stopped, Mia looked up at the estate before her, her mouth parted in awe. It wasn't just a venue, it was a kingdom. Tall marble columns rose like giants, golden lights spilled from crystal chandeliers inside, and the air smelled of roses more luxurious than any she had ever sold in her little shop. For a moment, Mia froze. "This can't be right," she thought. She looked again at the invitation. The name was there, clear as day. Mia Victoria. Her heart whispered, "Maybe this is where you're meant to be tonight." Adjusting her gown nervously, Mia stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble pathway. She didn't know that with every step she took toward those glowing doors, her life was moving closer to something she had never dared to imagine. Love, destiny, and a story that would change her forever. The estate loomed before Mia like something from a fairy tale. It wasn't just a building, it was a world she had never belonged to, Tall marble columns stretched upward, shining under the golden glow of the evening lights. Crystal chandeliers glittered through the high windows like captured stars, and the driveway was lined with cars so polished they reflected the night sky. Mia clutched her small clutch tighter, her borrowed shoes clicking softly against the stone steps. She took a shaky breath. "You can do this," she told herself. "It's just a wedding. No one will notice you." But the moment she stepped inside, all air seemed to vanish from her lungs. The entrance hall was vast, glowing with warmth, filled with guests dressed in gowns dripping with diamonds and men in suits worth more than her entire year's salary. She could smell perfume that reminded her of luxury magazines she had once flipped through while waiting at a bus stop. Her heart hammered. She looked down at her dress, simple, cream-colored, plain compared to the glittering gowns around her. She could almost hear the fabric whispering, "You don't belong here." Whispers began to ripple through the crowd as she walked in. Elegant women turned their heads, eyes narrowing slightly, and men leaned closer to each other, murmuring words she couldn't catch. Mia's cheeks burned hot. She thought it was her appearance, that her gown was too modest, her shoes too old, her hair pinned without the help of a professional stylist. She kept her head low, praying no one would ask her who she was. But there was another reason. No one recognized her. This was a gathering of the elite, people who all seemed to know one another, connected by wealth, power, and social ties. And Mia Victoria was a stranger in their world. Her steps faltered as her eyes drifted toward the front of the grand hall. The groom. Smith William. The name rang no bells in Mia's mind, for she had never followed news of business or fortunes. But to everyone else in the room, his name was enough to command silence and respect. He stood tall, 35 years old, broad shoulders filling his perfectly tailored suit. His jawline was sharp, his presence powerful, the kind of man who looked as though the world itself bent to his will. The glow of the chandeliers reflected against his dark suit, making him look like he had been carved out of strength and elegance itself. Mia's breath caught as her gaze locked onto him. For a moment, everything around her, the glittering guests, the murmurs, even the grand hall itself, faded into silence. And then something unexpected happened. Smith William turned his head. His piercing eyes, deep and unreadable, met hers across the room. The connection was instant, strange, electric, like invisible threads pulling them toward each other. Smith froze. His expression, once calm and controlled, flickered with something he couldn't hide. Surprise, curiosity, something deeper, something unexplainable. He was a man used to control, used to commanding boardrooms, making billion-dollar decisions without hesitation. Yet in that single second, as his eyes lingered on Mia, his entire world stilled. Who was she? Why was she here? Mia felt her pulse quicken. She dropped her gaze quickly, her cheeks flushing under the intensity of his stare. She didn't know what she had just stepped into, but her instincts told her one thing. Nothing about tonight was ordinary, and nothing about Smith Williams' frozen stare was casual. For the first time in her life, Mia Victoria realized she had walked into a world that wasn't hers. A world full of whispers, secrets, and a groom whose eyes seemed to see straight through her soul. Little did she know that single glance had just changed everything. Smith William had lived his life surrounded by people whose smiles were masks and whose words were bargains. He had seen faces that lit up not at the sound of his laughter, but at the mention of his fortune. Every handshake carried hidden motives. Every compliment carried weight, and every relationship was measured in power and profit. He had grown used to it, expecting greed, calculating deceit, and protecting his heart behind walls taller than the estate he now stood in. Yet tonight, in the middle of a ceremony that was supposed to seal a union of wealth and convenience, something pierced through those walls. It was her, Mia, the girl in the plain cream dress, standing quietly at the back of the grand hall. She didn't shimmer with diamonds, didn't flaunt a designer gown, didn't demand attention with loud laughter or polished charm. And yet, she was the only one he noticed. There was something in her eyes: purity, innocence, honesty. Things he had almost forgotten existed in a world where everything came with a price tag. She looked out of place, yes, but not ashamed. Lost, yes, but also fearless, as if she had walked into a lion's den and decided to hold her ground. Smith's chest tightened unexpectedly. It wasn't attraction alone. It was recognition, like a parched man suddenly smelling rain in the desert. His bride-to-be stood beside him, glowing with elegance, her smile perfect, rehearsed, every gesture refined. She was beautiful, yes, but her beauty was calculated, like a diamond locked in glass for display. And Smith knew the truth. He didn't love her. He never had. The marriage was arranged by families who cared more about empire than emotion, more about contracts than companionship. He had never spoken of his unhappiness, never dared to let his family see the cracks in his armor. But in that moment, his eyes betrayed him. As his gaze kept drifting back to Mia, a warmth spread in his chest, confusing, alarming, yet impossible to ignore. Then it happened. Mia, trying desperately to remain unnoticed, fumbled with her small clutch. The delicate bag slipped from her fingers and fell to the marble floor with a sharp clack. The sound echoed in the hall. Heads turned briefly, but most guests returned to their whispers. Smith, however, didn't look away. His eyes followed her every move as she bent down, her hands trembling as she picked it up, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. To others it was nothing, a small accident. But to him it was everything. The world, with all its noise and people, faded away. It was just him and her in that moment. A stranger in his wedding, a girl who clearly didn't belong in this glittering world, yet something inside him whispered with undeniable certainty. She doesn't belong here, but she belongs to me. The thought jolted him. It wasn't rational, it wasn't planned, but it was real. For the first time in years, Smith William felt something stirred deep inside him: hope. His bride stood beside him, unaware of the war in his heart. The officiant spoke words that blurred into meaningless sound. Guests smiled. Glasses clinked. Whispers filled the room. But Smith William's eyes were locked on one person only: the girl who had walked in by mistake. The girl who had just changed the course of his life with nothing more than her presence. The music swelled softly, and the ceremony began. Guests leaned forward with expectant smiles, eyes glistening under the glow of chandeliers. The bride stood tall beside Smith William, her beauty shimmering like a jewel polished to perfection. Her smile was graceful, practiced, yet cold. Smith, however, felt none of it. His chest tightened as the officiant's voice filled the room. The words that were supposed to be sacred, supposed to carry promise, felt like chains pressing around his throat. He opened his mouth to repeat the vows, but the words stuck. His tongue felt heavy, his heart restless. Beads of tension prickled at the back of his neck. Out of instinct, out of need, his eyes searched the crowd again, and there she was. Mia, the girl in the simple cream dress, standing quietly, clutching her small bag against her chest, trying to disappear among glittering diamonds and satin gowns. Her presence pulled at him with invisible force. Every fiber of his being screamed that she didn't belong here, yet in the same breath whispered that she belonged with him. The officiant cleared his throat, expecting Smith to continue. The bride glanced at him, her smile unwavering but her eyes sharp with warning. Families on both sides leaned forward, eager to hear him seal their fortunes together. But Smith William couldn't. The air thickened. The weight of silence grew unbearable. And then he did the unthinkable. "Wait," he said firmly. His deep voice carried through the grand hall like thunder. The music faltered, the murmurs froze, and an icy stillness spread. Gasps rose like a wave. Guests turned to each other in shock, whispers rising like fire catching dry leaves. The bride's family stiffened, their smiles vanishing instantly, anger flashing across their faces. The bride herself blinked, her smile faltering, lips trembling ever so slightly as if she hadn't prepared for rejection. Not here, not now, not in front of the world. But Smith didn't look at her. His eyes drifted again, straight to Mia. She froze under his gaze, her heart slamming against her chest. Confusion, fear, and something unnamed filled her eyes. She shook her head slightly, as though begging him silently, "Don't drag me into this." But it was too late. Smith stepped forward, his jaw set, his voice stronger this time. "I can't marry without love. And right now, my heart is telling me something different." The entire hall erupted in chaos. Protest from the bride's family, murmurs from the guests, sharp gasps of disbelief. People rose from their seats, hissing words about betrayal, about scandal, about disgrace. But Smith stood his ground, his broad shoulders squared, his expression unyielding. For once in his life, he wasn't speaking as the billionaire businessman, the dutiful son, the groom-to-be. He was speaking as a man who had found a spark of truth in a room full of lies. And that truth was Mia. Her face turned pale, panic swirling in her chest. She couldn't breathe. Her fingers clutched her small bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. The urge to flee overwhelmed her. She didn't belong here. She never should have come. Quietly, she began to slip toward the door, hoping to vanish before anyone noticed. Her heart whispered, "Run, Mia. This isn't your world." But then, the word cut through the chaos like a blade. Mia froze mid-step. Smith's voice rose deep and commanding, yet trembling with something vulnerable. "Don't go." The hall fell silent once more. Every eye turned toward her, the mysterious girl in the plain gown. Gasps filled the air again, sharper this time. Mia stood frozen, her face pale, her lips parting with disbelief. She didn't know why this man, this stranger, this billionaire at the altar, was looking at her as if she was the only person in the world. But in that moment, under the weight of his gaze, her soul whispered the truth her mind refused to believe. Something had just begun, something that could never be undone. The hall had erupted into whispers, accusations, and furious voices, but Smith William didn't care. His focus was fixed on the girl whose very presence had shaken his world. Mia slipped out of the heavy doors, her trembling hands clutching the railing as she descended the marble steps. The night air hit her face, cool and golden under the glow of lanterns. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, as though she had just escaped a fire. But she hadn't escaped, not yet. "Wait!" his voice called again, this time softer, yet filled with urgency. Mia stopped, her back stiffening. Slowly, she turned, and there he was. Smith William, no longer standing at the altar, no longer surrounded by glittering lights and shallow smiles. He was just a man, walking toward her beneath the wide evening sky. His gaze was steady, searching. "Who are you?" he asked gently. "Why were you there?" Mia's lips parted, but no sound came at first. She had no script for this moment, no way to soften the truth. She swallowed, her cheeks burning. I don't belong here," she whispered. "I wasn't supposed to be here at all." He frowned slightly, stepping closer. With a shaky breath, Mia confessed, "I found an invitation outside my door. It had my name on it, but it wasn't mine. I thought it was from an old friend, but I was wrong. I shouldn't have come." Her voice cracked with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Her eyes dropped to the ground, tears threatening to fall from the humiliation of it all. She expected him to be angry, to laugh, to dismiss her like a child who had wandered into a palace where she didn't belong. But instead, Smith smiled. A slow, genuine smile that softened the sharpness of his features. His voice was warm, low, almost tender. "Sometimes," he said, "mistakes lead us to what we've been searching for all along." Mia's heart stopped. She lifted her gaze in disbelief, only to find sincerity in his eyes. They began to walk side by side, their footsteps echoing along the stone path that wound through the estate gardens. The night was still, filled with the faint scent of roses, moonlight painting silver across the leaves. For the first time, Mia saw the man behind the billionaire. Not the power, not the sharp suit, not the wealth, but the loneliness etched into the corners of his eyes. "Do you know what it's like?" Smith asked quietly. "To have everything people dream of, and yet feel nothing inside?" His gaze lingered on the dark sky above. Power, wealth, respect, but not love, not honesty. Not someone who looks at you and sees you, not what you own. Mia's heart ached at the rawness in his voice. He wasn't speaking like a billionaire, he was speaking like a man starved of connection. She hesitated, then whispered, "I don't know that world. But I know what it's like to want more than survival, to dream of something simple, something real." Smith turned his head toward her, curious. "What do you dream of?" Her lips curved into the smallest smile, shy yet honest. "A flower shop of my own, not big, not fancy, just mine. A place where people walk in and find joy in small things. A place that feels like home." The honesty of her words disarmed him. It wasn't a dream of wealth or status. It wasn't a dream of climbing into his world. It was a dream born of heart and humility. For a long moment, Smith was silent. Then he whispered almost to himself, "Do you know how rare that is?" Mia blinked. "What?" "To meet someone who doesn't want to use me, who doesn't pretend, who doesn't care about the shine but about the soul." His eyes softened, filled with something unspoken. "Do you realize how much that means to me?" Mia's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. But she didn't need to. Her silence, her presence, the simplicity of her truth, it touched Smith's soul more deeply than anything money had ever bought him. And in that garden, beneath the stars, an unspoken promise was born. Weeks passed. Smith canceled his empty engagement, and instead of shame, he felt free. He visited Mia's flower shop often, helping her carry boxes, watering plants, even laughing with her among roses. The billionaire and the flower girl. Two worlds colliding, but fitting perfectly. Their love grew slowly, with trust and warmth. Soon, people began to whisper again, but this time, Smith didn't care. He stood proudly by Mia's side. At a small private ceremony, surrounded by flowers Mia had arranged herself, Smith held her hands and said, "You didn't just walk into my wedding. You walked into my life. And I thank God you did." Mia's eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "Sometimes the wrong path leads to the right heart." Their story became a lesson for everyone around them. Love is not about status or wealth. It's about honesty, respect, and seeing the person within. And so, the billionaire and the flower girl wrote their own love story, born from a mistake but ending in forever. Smith William found true love not in riches or arranged promises, but in an honest girl who walked into his life by accident. Their story whispered a lesson to society. Real love sees no class, only hearts.